Senator Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Education and Training, Senator Birmingham. Will the Minister update the Senate on how the government is supporting grandparents who are the primary carers of their grandchildren?
Order. The Minister for Education and Training, Senator Birmingham.
Well, thank you, Mr President. I thank Senator Smith for his question and acknowledge that Senator Smith was indeed a champion of the Senate inquiry in this place looking into the care that grandparents provide to their grandchildren and his interest in this topic. Our government's Jobs for Families childcare reforms are firstly about trying to make the childcare payment system simpler, reforming some 3+ different payment measures and subsidies into one simpler childcare subsidy system. Secondly, we're trying to ensure that they are fairer, that the support is there for families who work more to be able to access the greatest number of subsidised hours of childcare, and that for families who earn less to be able to access the greatest rate of subsidy in relation to that childcare. As part of those fairness components, we're very committed to having a strong safety net in place to support all those vulnerable children, vulnerable families and indeed grandparents who are the primary carers of their grandchildren. Importantly, we will be making sure that as part of our reforms, grandparents do not have to meet the activity test requirements that otherwise apply for access to childcare. The activity test is there to make sure that those families who most need childcare and most need childcare hours are best able to get and access those hours. But we recognise that in relation for grandparents who are the primary carers of their grandchildren, they are providing support and care and love for their grandchildren at times of great need. But of course they're doing so in their retirement years quite often, and they deserve a level of respite, they deserve a level of support, and we want to make sure that wherever possible they are not out of pocket for that support that they provide for their grandchildren. It's part of our commitment to make sure the childcare system is fair, is simple, is affordable for all of those who need it, supporting the most vulnerable while supporting those Australians who are accessing it to balance work and family obligations too.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Smith, supplementary question.
Thank you very much, Mr President. How will the Jobs and Families package further support grandparents who are the primary carers of their grandchildren and on income support?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, in addition to waiving the activity test for grandparents, we are providing for those grandparents who are the primary carers and on some form of income support essentially a complete exemption from the likelihood of paying childcare fees. What we're introducing is an hourly cap in relation to childcare fees against which the subsidy will be paid, $11.55 for long day care. This is intended to place downward pressure on childcare fees over time and ensure that the extra $3 billion our government is contributing to childcare doesn't have an inflationary impact on fees. And to make sure that grandparents within that cap are able to access services they need, we'll be providing up to 120% subsidy against that hourly cap to ensure that even where services are above the cap, grandparents are hopefully not out of pocket. We estimate this will support around 3,900 grandparents around Australia in their love and care for more than 6,000 grandchildren.
Thank you, Minister. Final supplementary question, Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr President. How is the government funding this childcare package?
Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr President. This is a very important aspect because, indeed, this side of politics recognise that when you're going to embark on major reforms that come with additional costs, and in the case of the childcare reforms they involve more than $3 billion of additional expenditure, they must be paid for. Some on that side seem to recognise that as well, Mr President, because I know that Ms Macklin, the Shadow Family spokesman, has acknowledged that the childcare reforms must be paid for somehow. They must be paid for somehow, she said. Yet the Labor Party have no means of identifying how they will pay for it. On this side of politics, we have indicated reforms that will help to pay for this additional $3 billion in support. Reforms so that we can afford to support grandparents in their care for their grandchildren. Reforms so that we can ensure families who need the greatest number of hours of childcare support are able to access it. Reforms to ensure the families who need the greatest level of subsidy are able to access the greatest level of subsidy. But those opposite seem to stand in the way of such reforms and stand against helping those who most need assistance.